Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And my name's Attiba.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are on Season 3, Episode 21, The Die is Cast, Part 2. This episode aired May 1st, 1995. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about last week's episode?
No, it was perfect.
Agreed.
Okay, so we have Attiba Royster with us again this week. He likes to join us for the very exciting two-parters. I didn't see you raise your hand for, like, Fascination or any of the dud episodes.
No, I should have been on for past tense, but I missed that one.
Oh, past tense was good. All right, well, I have like 8 pages of notes, so I feel like we probably should get started.
Okay.
In the cold open, we do get a last time on Deep Space Nine where we're reminded of the explosion behind Garak's shop and that the Romulans and Cardassians are up to something together, and we see Garak returning to the fold with Anabra and Tain. It was all very dramatic. But then we open with Miles and Julian having lunch, where Julian is just endlessly talking about the decline of the modern theater, and Miles could care less.
Is this a segment from NPR that Julian is quoting?
I don't know. He's very full of himself in this scene, and Miles is just so not interested. He just keeps eating his lunch while Julian babbles on, and eventually Julian is annoyed that Miles isn't listening to him. He misses his philosophical debates over lunch with Garak. That's the real point of the scene.
Oh, yes, because the cultural trope of the enlisted working man could have no appreciation for the higher things like theater.
Yeah. Julian's definitely a bit snooty here. They paint Miles as if maybe he's uneducated or something. I don't know. It's not great.
Did we notice that Bashir was left in the exact same position that Garak was left in at the beginning of the previous episode?
Oh.
Right, where Miles is just shoveling in his lunch, which is what Bashir was doing to Garak.
I did not notice that.
Well, anyway, at the end of the scene, Kira calls for Miles to report to Ops. In Ops, Dax, Kira, and Sisko are looking at some sensor readings indicating high concentrations of tetrion particles moving toward the station. They say a lot of science words, but what happens is a bunch of Romulan and Cardassian ships start decloaking. An entire fleet appears as Sisko raises shields and says to prepare weapons. But those ships aren't here for the station. They're on their way into the wormhole. Sisko calls for a channel to Starfleet Command as we cue the theme song.
Now, considering all these ships are in Bajoran space and are decloaking, isn't that some kind of violation of Bajoran territory? Shouldn't DS9 at least be firing upon them?
Well, maybe if they fired first. I don't know.
Well, they've already committed arguably an act of war by violating Bajoran sovereignty, and they're all cloaked warbirds and Cardassian ships, so...
Well, there's a treaty with the Cardassians now.
True.
So just flying into the space wouldn't be an act of war.
Without permission.
Well, I don't know. What's the treaty say? I'd have to see the fine print.
Oh, now you're talking.
I mean, it just seems like Cardassian ships have come in here before and we haven't fired on them. Romulans maybe is different, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, but the Federation is trying to make nice with the Romulans at this point, so...
That's true, because they were just there a few episodes ago trying to get the debrief on what was going on with the Dominion, so yeah.
That's true.
I think you're ready to start shooting, but that doesn't seem like that's the thing right now. We go to the Romulan warbird where Tain and Garak are chilling with cocktails, talking about old times. Tain is reminded of Garak's vicious streak and his gift for interrogation. They agree he was brilliant, even getting a confession out of someone by just staring at him for hours. It's the Mutual Admiration Society as they sit next to each other on the couch drinking their mimosas. Garak says there are a number of people he's going to look up when he gets back to Cardassia, including a gull named Dukat. Tain says he can eliminate anyone he wants when he gets back, which is a very funny thing to say. Come back, kill anyone you like.
Okay.
Yeah.
I went back and watched this scene because I think it's important. When Garak brings up Dukat and Tain says, oh yes, the business with the arms merchant. I take it you'd like him eliminated. This is really odd. Tain didn't seem to be that aware of who Dukat was. Dukat was the former prefect of Bajor. He oversaw the withdrawal. This dude is a big cheese. You would know who he was. I think this is a hint that Tain is kind of out of touch. Tain isn't the guy he thinks he is or was in the past.
Well, there's definitely more of that towards the end. It's also kind of a Cardassian thing, though, to have a little bit of bluster about how, that person's not that important, so it could have been part of a game. Also, I wonder if the Bajoran post you were talking about, was that kind of a lesser post? because he's got this problem, Tain, with the Bajorans, and he's looking at them so much as lesser because he makes a couple of comments about that in this episode.
Oh.
And so maybe he's just going, oh, yeah, they put the worst gulls in charge of the Bajorans.
That's the point that I was going to make. Like, at the beginning of the show, DS9, this was a trash posting. Like, who's to say it wasn't a trash posting when the Cardassians had it?
Right, exactly.
Interesting.
I mean, I think you may have been sucked into Ducat's propaganda, his self-propaganda.
Yeah, his self-importance.
I'm sorry, but I think Ducat is the most important person in Cardassia.
He definitely thinks so.
Also, every other Cardassians we meet, really, in any kind of position of power, kind of treats Ducat, not like a joke, but like dismissively. So I don't know that he's really that big of a deal, honestly.
I think you are on to something. Well, Garak says he's going to make up a list and give it to Mila, the housekeeper, which that's no ordinary housekeeper. Here's my list of people to kill.
Yes.
But Tain says Mila may not be around much longer. She knows too much. Garak thinks it would be a shame to have her killed since she's been so loyal. Tain says Mila always believed Garak was innocent of betraying Cardassia. And also Tain. I was, Garak says.
Wait a sec. Didn't Garak admit to it where he gave that very emotional outburst and said, I was innocent in my heart?
I don't know if we can really count that as an admission.
It's like, whatever happened, I didn't mean it. I don't know. It was a weird statement. And it's like they're kind of toying with us at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, this all of a sudden now he's like, I was innocent. It might mean the same thing of what he was saying before. I didn't really mean it. I wasn't betraying you. Whatever it is, he did. He didn't see it as a betrayal.
Right. I didn't see it as betrayal.
Right. But both of them do seem to care about Mila, the housekeeper, but neither will admit a soft spot for her or that they want to keep her alive.
There's so much posturing.
Yeah, it's intense. As they're having their mimosas, which is so funny, and sitting next to each other on the couch. The whole day, it's the weirdest scene.
They so missed the hot tub scene here.
Oh my God, it should have been in the hot tub. That would have been cute. Well, then Colonel Lovak, a Romulan officer, enters. Tain introduces Garak as a cherished colleague of long standing who will do whatever he's asked to do on this mission. Lovak appears to not really care and just says Garak isn't allowed on the bridge unescorted. He reports that the fleet has recloaked and is heading for the Founder's homeworld at Warp 6. Garak mocks the slow speed, but Lovak points out that going faster will make them detectable by the Jem'Hadar. He also says the changeling is locked up and protected by force fields. Tain says Garak's first task is to get some info out of Odo about the Founders. Garak says Odo is quite stubborn, and they smile sort of creepily at each other.
Well, I don't know how important Lovak is because he doesn't have huge shoulders, but they are still bigger than the guys previously.
He doesn't have huge shoulders, you're right. So Garak drops in on Odo, who is pacing angrily. Odo snaps at Garak, saying he won't believe anything Garak has to say ever again. Not sure why he would have ever believed him before, but okay. In this scene, Garak says he did pledge his undying devotion to Odo and the Federation. Yeah. When did that happen? Or was that just some mind game?
I assume that by helping the Federation, that Garak is saying that, he pledged to help them. Kind of a word game. I think he helped them when it was in his best interests.
Oh, for sure, to protect himself, yeah. Well, it's a weird conversation, and there are lots of things in this episode like that, where somebody says something and I wrote down, what? Because I keep thinking, is this a clue of something to come, or did I miss something from before?
Well, I think one of the clues here is when Odo points out that Garak's lies are becoming more transparent.
That's true.
He's not fooling Odo.
Well, they do banter a bit, and Odo says that Garak's getting a little rusty at lying, like you get out of practice, maybe. He warns him to not let Tain see that he's feeling guilty about what he's done, and Garak, of course, does not own up to this.
Oh, no. I think Odo, as a keen observer of the humanoid form,
yes,
really can tell that Garak is feeling something close to guilt. That's also underlined by the fact that Garak needed to justify his actions to Odo. If it didn't matter, what does it care what Odo thinks? Why would he even bother talking to him? Why would he even have that intro?
Right, and we see a little bit more of that later. He hasn't really started questioning him yet.
Odo's picking up that the mask is starting to slip.
Right. So Garak asks Odo to share his unique insights on the Founders. He tries playing the card that the Founders are a common enemy, but Odo isn't interested in chatting on this topic, or any topic really. He insists that the only common enemy they have is Tain, but Garak hasn't figured that out yet.
I think Odo is probably on the right track there.
Yeah, well, Tain is an interesting character. He's not particularly scary. He's almost like your old Cardassian grandpa, but then he does and says some scary things, but he's not particularly imposing when you're in the room with him. And I wondered, there are many scenes where they do these super close-ups of his face, and you're not seeing his whole form. He's not wearing a uniform, right? He's still got that crazy old grandpa sweater on that he's had for now many episodes. I wonder if that's why they do that. They're trying to make him a little bit more imposing than he actually is.
Yeah.
So we go back to the station and Snodgrass is back.
Yes.
This is a text message I sent to James when I was watching this episode.
Eddington has disabled his cloaking field and he's visible again.
Yes. We're all sitting at a table watching Inabra and Tain on a big TV in a message meant for Cardassian Central Command. He's talking about wiping out the Founders, which will cut off the supply of the drug the Jem'Hadar require to live, which we learned in The Abandoned. And that means that all of the Dominion and its goons are going to be wiped out in a single attack. He says there's likely to be an attack on the Alpha Quadrant before the Jem'Hadar all die off, so he suggests getting ready for that. Then he criticizes the Central Command, saying they put all Cardassians at risk by allowing peace with Bajor and the Federation. And here we've arrived at his entire problem.
Oh, yeah.
He's a bit of a supremacist. Anyway, he closes his message by saying, "Let history be my judge." Very dramatic. Then Admiral Todman, by the way, in a gold uniform as an admiral, which totally blew my mind. I had to go down a Google path to figure out what that was all about. He comes on the screen saying, "A Federation outpost intercepted this message, and a similar message went to the Romulan government. Both governments are denying knowledge of this plan." He says that both governments claim to be working on a plan to stop Tain, but the Federation believes they'll just sit back and see if his plan actually works before they do anything. The Admiral thinks that Tain has a pretty good chance of succeeding with his fleet of 20 ships run by old racists, which I find quite comical. He says he doesn't hope for war, but if it happens, he'd rather see the Dominion lose. I wondered here, too, if they forgot that the Galaxy-class starship that was wiped out by, one or two of those little cockroach ships?
3 of them.
I don't know how they think 20 ships is going to somehow win a war.
Yeah, overwhelming force, not a small fleet. It's more like a task group than or a battle group than an actual fleet.
But they've got the element of surprise, guys.
But do they? Because we've already gone into the other quadrant cloaked, thinking we were going to surprise the Founders, and it didn't go very well. But this is kind of what happens by people who have giant egos. They're going to not make the same mistake, but then they make the same mistake.
Right. I think that's a huge part of this, the egos of the people involved.
Yes. Well, then the Admiral tells Sisko to get non-essential personnel off the station, and he denies Sisko's request to take the Defiant on a mission to find Odo. He says the Defiant needs to guard Bajor, and then he hangs up.
Well, of course he's going to say no, because all Starfleet admirals are evil.
And they all say no to things like this, but then the captains still go and do it. That's the pattern.
Attiba pointed this out the last time he was on.
I did point that out, but I think I was being a bit glib there. They are either evil or incompetent. They're on some level of that spectrum.
That makes it so much better.
Yeah.
He's not evil, he's just useless.
Well, they're either promoted through ambition or incompetence. It's just like the business world. It's not that different.
Ooh, harsh. And I think the final thing I'm going to say here is I assume the Defiant's role in defending Bajor, if the Jem'Hadar come through, would be to be destroyed as fast as possible.
Yeah. Remember, the Jem'Hadar attacked the Defiant and took it out in 2 seconds.
Exactly.
The Bajorans do have their own militia and fighters and ships.
Now, this was a sad story. I think this whole thing of how, the Defiant needs to go and guard Bajor. There's something funny going on there.
Yeah.
That's not a great piece of advice.
Okay, I find Starfleet and the Federation's response here kind of strange. They know that the Obsidian Order and the Tal Shiar are embarking on a mission to commit an act of genocide. And Starfleet's take is, well, let's see what happens. They might succeed, which will be fine. It's like, okay, so genocide is all right if it's against our enemies. Are we in the mirror universe?
Well, I think we've established that we only care about people we like in Star Trek.
Okay. I just think this really kind of doesn't fit. Imagine how Picard would react to that.
Yeah, the whole thing is suspicious.
Right.
I guess you could look at this like they're quite afraid of the Founders and quite afraid of the Dominion in general because they're clearly much more powerful than the Federation is, right? Certainly in terms of their firepower and their ships, but also they've got advanced technology that the Federation doesn't have because they're able to beam in and out of the shields without any trouble. So there's probably a lot of fear around it. Just stay out of it is the best advice when you're super afraid of something. However, you could also look at it this way, which is you could send the Defiant in. The Defiant is not going to stop those 20 ships. They would just be sending in the Defiant just to get itself blown up. It's not like they could do anything. So instead, they're saying, hold back.
Also, Picard can be out there waving the flag for the Federation, but this is the main difference between Next Gen and DS9, in my opinion. Picard never really has to deal with the consequences of things, and for the most part. I mean, sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. But there's a bigger geopolitical, or I guess whatever the prefix that means galactic, political, because the Federation would always prefer to handle this through a diplomatic outlet. But there just isn't time for that. And again, the only thing you could do is send the Defiant in. And the best thing the Defiant could do is maybe stand between the fleet and the planet. And what point is that? They're just going to blow up the Defiant anyway. You'd basically be ordering them all to commit suicide to save the life of a mortal enemy. So
exactly.
But it could show a willingness of the Federation to defend against acts of genocide. You remember Tasha Yar? She was captured when the starship went back to fight a fruitless battle against the Romulans on behalf of the Klingons. And they still lost. And they knew the history they lost, but they still did it.
But again, that was in service of the greater geopolitical situation, which this would not be in service of.
It's a suicide mission, at any rate, if they're going to send the Defiant in. And they're not going to order that, because that's not going to help. But you could still give a different message. The trouble is, he said, hey, we're all just going to hang back and wait for something to happen. That's the message the Cardassian government and the Romulan government, and as it turns out, the Federation are all saying. That's the problem. He could have easily given a different message, which is, I'm not letting you go in there. You're just going to get yourself blown up. That's somebody else's problem until we're able to get our own ships there. But that's just not what he said.
I mean, it just goes to show that even in the 24th century, everybody defaults to covering their own butt.
So true.
Yeah, I'm afraid I have to agree with that.
Yeah, I don't see that changing anytime soon. So Snodgrass says that Starfleet is planning to send 9 starships into the sector tomorrow to help with security. So Sisko thinks this is the perfect time to go after Odo. He says he wants the Defiant ready to leave for the Gamma Quadrant in 2 hours. Snodgrass reminds him of Admiral Todman's orders, which is never a good look 1 second after the orders were given. I heard what he said, dude, but I don't care.
So this is confirming Eddington is a complete suck-up to the Admiral.
He's a definite lackey.
Yeah.
Sisko refuses to abandon one of his officers. He says this rescue mission is voluntary because there's a good chance they won't make it back. And even if they do, they'll probably be court-martialed. And then he dismisses everyone. So, of course, everybody goes to the Defiant.
Oh, yeah. You gotta love Sisko. There's not even I'm gonna think about this and stew on it and then order the mission. No, he's straight to, we're gonna go and rescue Odo. He always sticks up for his people.
Well, and it's such an interesting dynamic with Odo because Odo doesn't really work for him, right?
Yeah.
Odo is kind of his own thing, and he got pushed aside when the Snodgrass character came in.
Yep.
And then there was that episode where the one with Odo's dad, where Sisko basically said, hey, if we can't get control of the situation, we're going to kill Odo.
Yeah.
And then there was the other episode where he was having the conversation with Kira, where Starfleet all along has been pushing him to kind of get rid of Odo and push him aside. And yet he's still willing to put his life on the line to go and rescue him. So I think that's interesting. You got to save the team.
Well, also, and I think from a purely self-interest standpoint, Odo has been extremely useful for Sisko. So even if you took a more cynical look and said, works well for my career, it's certainly not hurting me completing my mission here. Yeah, maybe I should save him. It's better for me in the long run.
Oh, you want Odo on your side, especially with the existence of the Founders.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the right play. There's no doubt. But it's also very dangerous and very risky.
Just want to point out something quickly. So we're on the station.
Yeah.
They've had time to receive and decode Tain's message and get a message from Starfleet Command. Yet you still need 2 hours to get the Defiant ready?
Still need 2 hours.
Why wasn't it gassed up as soon as a bunch of warbirds decloaked right off the station?
You got to run it through the car wash. Got to fill the tires. You got to check the oil.
I have a theory about that.
Yeah.
I will cover in over-analysis.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So now everybody is on the Defiant, including Snodgrass. Kira says Admiral Todman is calling to remind them to not go into the Gamma Quadrant, but Sisko tells her she can't be sure that's what the message says because that transmission is so garbled. And she pauses and then she says, oh, right, there's a lot of subspace interference on that channel. Sisko so frequently does that sort of Kirk Spock thing where they had like their secret language where they could, figure out what the other was saying.
Yeah.
But his crew, they are not caught up with him. They always take a beat to figure out what it is that he's trying to do. I find that really funny that we haven't got to that point yet. Maybe we will get there.
I thought Kira would have picked up on that by now.
Yeah, Kira, and he's done it with Miles a couple of times, but even that is like, oh, right. Miles would say, it's like, no, you guys got to be cooler than that. But
I don't know.
They're not there yet.
Do you think that's because it was Starfleet Command, and she doesn't really know if Sisko's all the way in to go against Starfleet Command? I'm sure if it was Kai Wynn, instantly she would have been on board. Of course he's not going to do what she says, but is she still sensing a little trepidation from him? Maybe he's not ready to go all the way over the edge. Oh, he is? Okay, then let's do this.
So she's being more cautious.
She's being more cautious because she just doesn't know where Sisko stands exactly in regards to his superiors of Starfleet Command. Is he committed to Odo? Or is he 100% committed to Starfleet Command? I know he's on this mission, but how far is he willing to go?
And he's gone back and forth a little bit, because if we looked at Duet, he was all in with what Starfleet was telling him. And then we go to the 3-parter at the beginning of season 2, where Starfleet told him to get off of that station and just sort of let whatever was going to happen. And he didn't do that.
Yeah.
He did exactly what he wanted to do to protect his crew and to protect the Bajorans. So she's seen him kind of on both sides, but if we look at the episode Destiny, that's kind of where they were starting to get on the same page, where she admitted that she sees him as the emissary. He's starting to admit, okay, maybe there is something to this emissary thing. So I feel like their minds are starting to come together a little bit.
Yeah.
But she's definitely seen him do both things of, I'm going to follow my orders to the letter and then I'm not. So yeah, maybe that's why she hesitated.
Good take.
Well, during this whole scene, they keep showing Snodgrass's face. So you know that something is up here, and we're way too trusting. I don't even know why he's on the Defiant, but here he is.
They do that scene cut to suck up Eddington, and he does not appear to like what's going on.
He does not. But through the wormhole we go, and Cloak on the other side.
And we get lots of Defiant. Love it.
I'm surprised that the Romulans didn't take their cloaking device back, but we still have it. And they head to the Founder's homeworld at Warp 8. So they're going to catch up because the old guys are going at Warp 6 and we're going to come in at Warp 8.
The Romulans couldn't find the cloaking device because it was cloaked.
Oh my God. Wow. It's like a dad joke. We go back on Tain's Romulan ship, and Lovak is giving a presentation about the Founder's homeworld, saying it would take at least 7 hours for Jem'Hadar's ships to arrive and help. I don't know. This whole thing seems a little questionable to me. I don't know where'd you get that information from. But the plan is to enter the orbit of the Founder's homeworld, decloak, and bombard the planet, causing the planet's crust to be destroyed within an hour and the mantle within 5 hours. Their only concern is there might be some planetary defenses that they don't know about. Oh, really? And Tain says Garak really needs to get this info out of Odo.
I'll just say, remember how the Cardassians leave things out of plans that don't fit what they want to happen?
Yes. Again, in the episode Destiny, where they were leaving out the risks because they didn't want it to seem like the plan would fail. So you think the Romulans are doing the same thing?
Well, they're working with the Obsidian Order. It could exactly be that. Oh yeah, it'll take them 7 hours to get here. We'll leave out the line where it says, or 20 minutes.
Yeah. So Garak thinks that Odo would have included everything he knew in his report to Starfleet, but Tain thinks that Garak is just avoiding interrogating Odo. Tain says the Obsidian Order has a device that will stop Odo from being able to shapeshift, which will help with the interrogation. Lovak is like, hey, wait, I've not heard of this device, but Tain says it's a prototype that hasn't been tested. He suggests the Tal Shiar take over the interrogation, and then he takes a dig at Garak for becoming friends with someone who worked for the Bajorans.
Ooh, I think that is really underlying the Cardassian bigotry about the Bajorans. Not the fact he might be friends with a founder. He's upset that he was a friend of somebody who worked for the Bajorans.
Yeah.
They have such a problem with the Bajorans.
It's hard to understand this kind of stupidity, but I think that Tain could very easily tell himself a story about Garak getting something out of having a friendship with one of the founders, that he could be trying to learn from it and it could be strategic. But he's never going to think that about the Bajorans.
Yeah.
Well, Garak says he brought Odo here, so he should do the interrogating. And he also says that he knows Tain isn't going to trust him until he does that task.
Tain really gave us some digs here.
Yeah, he did.
It was almost kind of a passive-aggressive. Is this how their relationship does work?
Yeah, he's a bad dad.
Yeah, it really does seem like this is their typical dynamic. Like they fell right back into it. So.
Yeah.
Yes. They tell each other how brilliant they are. And then they start taking digs at each other.
Yeah, it seems a little toxic.
Dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Back on the Defiant, the cloaking device fails and they're forced to stop. Sisko says if the Jem'Hadar turn up while they're decloaked, they'll have to fight their way out. And the camera does this crazy soap opera close-up as we go into an ad break. I really laughed at that.
Yeah.
That was super dramatic. Well, it turns out Snodgrass sabotaged the device under orders from Admiral Stick-Up-His-Butt. When I got to this point, I couldn't remember his name anymore. Snodgrass claims that Odo is his friend too, which is a surprise.
Really?
And we've seen exactly one interaction between him and Odo, and they were not friends. But anyway, he says that he reports directly to the Admiral dude and he couldn't disobey the order. But he's still there trying to go and save Odo.
So he's been proved to be a super suck-up to the Admiral.
And now he's trying to suck up to Sisko.
So do you think he told the Admiral after Sisko announced the plan?
Probably.
I assume that Eddington reported directly to the Admiral, told him what Sisko was going to do, and the Admiral told him to do whatever it takes, sabotage the ship, whatever.
Yeah. Except he only sabotaged the cloak.
Yeah.
Sisko tells Miles to fix the cloak. Miles says it will take 10 hours, but Sisko gives him 2.
Classic Star Trek.
Yeah, Snodgrass convinces Sisko not to confine him to his quarters. He says he followed the orders of the Admiral, but that's all that he did. He didn't damage anything else. Why would you believe that? But anyway, Sisko says he makes it a policy to take the word of people wearing the Starfleet uniform. I'm not sure you should do that, especially with the shape-shifting abilities of the founders, because who knows, maybe he's a founder.
Ooh.
And he sends Snodgrass back to his station and leaves him on the bridge.
So I loved the look that Miles gave Eddington as he walks past him. It's absolute daggers.
He does not like it when people break his stuff.
Clearly.
That makes Miles very angry, because then he has to go and fix it.
Now, only one small problem here. Eddington says he gave his word. But what if the Admiral ordered him to lie to complete his sabotage?
I know. I don't think we should trust him. And why would we? And where's he been for 20 episodes? Dude's been hiding. He hasn't even been doing any work.
He's been using an experimental personal cloak.
This guy. Back on the very dark Romulan ship, Garak comes in to see Odo with a bucket, saying he realizes it must be time for him to return to his liquid state. But he doesn't need a bucket, right? I mean, he could just melt onto the floor, into the corner. There's like a little bedroom or something off of the room he's in. You don't actually need the bucket.
The special effects guys need a bucket.
I see. But to me, this was like waiting until your car is out of gas to fill it when you don't know when you're going to have another chance. I do not understand this way of thinking. Why would he not have regenerated in some way while he was locked in that cell? I don't get it.
Good point.
So Garak gives him the little bucket, but says he just has some questions to ask Odo first. Meanwhile, some Romulans are setting up a device on a nearby table. Odo sarcastically says, "Oh no, you're going to torture me, aren't you? Please have mercy, Garak." Then Garak turns on the device and sends the Romulans away. Odo threatens Garak, finally, but Garak says this fancy device is emitting a quantum stasis field that prevents him from shape-shifting. Odo should have, at this point, just rushed the table and knocked the thing over and broken it. But instead, he tries to shapeshift, and he can't, and he gets immediately very frustrated.
He can move physically, so yeah, knock it off the table.
Yeah, just knock it over. The Romulans left.
Cats are very effective at that.
That's very true. Garak asks what happens if he can't revert to a liquid state, and Odo doesn't know. Garak figures whatever happens, it's not going to be pleasant. He thinks Odo is keeping a secret, and he's sure there's something about the founders that Odo hasn't revealed yet.
I'm just wondering why, if this machine was developed by the Obsidian Order, why wouldn't Cardassians be assembling it?
I thought the same thing. It seemed like somebody from the Order should have done it, except there's nobody on that ship but Tain, as far as we know.
It did seem that way.
Yeah, Tain and Garak are the only Cardassians on the ship, right? We don't see any others.
I think so. Back on the Defiant, it's been 3 hours and they're getting antsy, but Sisko won't allow anyone to bother Miles while he works trying to fix the cloaking device. We go back to the interrogation room, and Odo is looking very rough. He is kind of deteriorating into a decaying version of himself. His face and skin are peeling off of him. He's a very dark color. His eyes have sunken back into his head, and he is shivering.
This is really great makeup.
It's very scary, actually.
Yeah, it's so well done.
Garak claims to be taking no pleasure in this. He's just doing his job. Odo, who can still scoff while he's deteriorating, recognizes that this is the job that Garak has been longing to return to. He says it must fill you with pride. Garak is a little agitated. He says, just tell me what I need to know and this will all end.
Odo is really taunting him.
Yep.
Even when he's falling apart like this, he's still making these digs at Garak. I think this comes back to he realizes that it's having an effect on Garak.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but I think you're right. I think that is why he continues to poke at him.
Yeah.
So Odo keeps mocking Garak, and Garak claims it's not personal, but when Odo screams in distress, Garak gasps. He shouts at Odo to tell him something.
He's actually pleading with him.
Yes, he kneels beside him and he whispers into his ear, lie if you have to, but say something. Finally, Odo admits that he longs to return home to the Founders and enter the Great Link. He says he tried to deny it and forget it, but he can't. He wants to be with them. Garak knew there was something he was holding back. He rushes over to the device and shuts it off as Odo turns into liquid and dumps himself into the little bucket. And Garak drops his head in his hands, obviously distressed. And we go to a dramatic ad break.
Wow. I think Garak is perhaps not the man he used to be. This interrogation is actually causing him distress. He genuinely seemed upset and was pleading with Odo.
Well, you can wonder why he's gotten to this point. Did he get to this point because he's actually made some friends on the station and he's seen like how teams work together and they can care for and protect each other?
Yeah.
You know, is that why? Is it age? Has he lost his ambition? Is the reason that he acted the way he did before because he was just super ambitious and trying to get to the top? Or was he just trying to please Tain and so he would do whatever it took and he didn't have any empathy for anyone else because he didn't see anybody else with empathy? I mean, there's so many reasons why we could have arrived at this point.
But I think the focus here is to show that he isn't the person he was. It isn't even fun anymore for him.
Right. When people use the excuse of they're just following orders, which I think he said, right? He was just kind of doing his job.
It's not personal.
Yeah. It's always hard to know, well, then what are you getting out of it? You know, you're just trying to protect yourself. And all he's getting out of it here is that he's getting back to Cardassia, which is the thing that he's wanted forever. But he doesn't seem to want to pay the price that it's going to take in order to get back. So it's very interesting to watch this. Well, Miles has fixed the cloaking device, and we've resumed our course to the Founders at maximum warp now.
And nobody fell in love with him while doing it?
No, because they just left him alone. And then we go back to the Romulan ship, and Garak tells Tain that he got nothing out of Odo, saying he never broke, so Tain orders his termination. Garak wonders if killing Odo will provoke the Federation. Lovak, surprisingly at this point, says he agrees with Garak, since they might need his cooperation later, and he says he wants to take Odo back to Romulus for further study. Tain reluctantly agrees.
Why do we think Garak tries to save Odo's dignity, reputation, by not revealing the information?
Because at this point, why did he even turn off the machine if he got a piece of information he wasn't going to share? He still didn't get what he wanted.
Yeah.
Maybe at that point he just couldn't do it anymore. But still, I mean, he took it pretty far to get that info and then he didn't do anything with it. I don't know.
Guilt. That part at the end where he puts his head in his hands, that shows where Garak ended up. Garak didn't like doing that. Garak does have guilt.
Definitely. And maybe he thought he would get something useful, but there's really nothing terribly useful about that piece of information for Tain anyway. So maybe that's also why he held it back.
I think maybe Garak is actually starting to realize that Odo and his friendship and these personal bonds that he made are actually worth more than his relationship with Tain.
What if he's playing a long game where now he's got something on Odo?
Wow.
That he could maybe use later.
Wow.
That would be a very long game, yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, but we know Garak likes to play really long games, so...
The Cardassians play incredibly long games, like that episode, The Cardassians, where Dukat took the kid of one of the other Cardassians. I mean, it took years for that game to play out.
That's true.
Well, they get a message that they're 15 minutes from the Founders' homeworld. When Tain leaves, Lovak asks why Garak was protecting the changeling, but Garak denies it, of course. Lovak says Garak is a practiced liar, but Lovak is a practiced observer, and he's going to keep an eye on him.
Yeah, Lovak totally calls out Garak. He says, "You seem to have a personal interest in him."
They arrive at the Founders' homeworld and scan the planet, reading several life forms in a liquid state. The fleet drops their cloaks and starts firing at the planet. It's not terribly dramatic, this effect, but the first attack shows no change in life form readings. Tain is like, what? And then there's that super close-up on his face again. And Garak says, uh-oh, they're using an automated transponder to send back false readings. The planet is deserted. And then 150 Jem'Hadar fighters emerge from the nebula. And suddenly your 20 ships run by old farts seems a little feeble. It's a trap, Garak says. They've been waiting for us all along.
And a shocked-looking Tain as we go into the break.
I know this would ruin all continuity and crash down all kinds of barriers, but I really think Admiral Akbar should have done a cameo right there.
It's a trap.
Would have been perfect.
After the ad break, you can imagine what happens as the Jem'Hadar ships just start shooting the crap out of the Cardassian and Romulan ships.
Oh yeah, it's a great space battle. I'm loving this.
Garak tries to convince Lovak to make a run for it, but he says there's no way out. Tain is just railing. How could this happen? Garak says, the fault, dear Tain, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. He says it's something he learned from Dr. Bashir.
So we have come full circle.
This is the tie-in, to the first scene of the two-parter where we hear Garak complain about the Shakespeare tragedy, because this is also a line from that play. So Lovak calls engineering but gets no response, so he heads to engineering himself, leaving Tain in charge. But the ship continues to get bombarded, and Garak kind of backs out of the room and then runs to where Odo is being held, knocking out the guard, who is weirdly still standing guard as the ship crumbles around him. Odo is back in full form and says, it seems like the Founder's attack is not going to plan. Garak suggests they head to the runabout. Before they leave, Commander Lovak enters, gun drawn, but he's not there to attack. He gives Odo a pad which will give him access to the runabout. Then he says no changeling has ever harmed another changeling, because Lovak is a founder. I did not see that coming.
Oh yeah, that was the big reveal.
Yeah, the line about being a practiced observer is a little bit of a key.
Oh,
good point.
Because that's what Odo always calls himself.
That's a good point. Yeah, I did not pick that up.
Yeah.
Well, Odo is like, of course, this whole plan was the Founder's idea. He says, you wanted the Order and the Tal Shiar to join forces. Lovak says, Tain originated the plan, and when we learned of it, we did everything we could to carry it forward. The Tal Shiar and the Obsidian Order are both ruthless, efficient organizations who represented a real threat. But after today, the only real threat from the Alpha Quadrant are the Klingons and the Federation, and I doubt either of them will be a threat for much longer. Here's the second part where I wrote, what? What does that mean?
I think he's tipping his hand a little bit too much here.
A little bit.
Yeah, something's coming from that.
Especially if this information gets back that a senior Romulan colonel was actually a changeling. That should set off all sorts of red flags.
Well, it may or may not get back.
Well,
depending on who survives here.
They've let Odo go, effectively.
Well, Odo and Garak, yeah, but who knows if they're going to share that information or if anybody would believe what they had to say outside of the Federation.
Okay.
And also, would Odo share that info? Yeah, he probably would.
I think so.
There's also a part of it that they don't know how long he's been Lovak.
So
Garak and Odo don't know. Like, it could have just happened. You know what I mean? Or it could have been months. Who knows?
Oh, I see what you mean. Right.
Well, also, what this means is that Tain's plan was going to work.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah. If he hadn't made the mistake of underestimating the shifting abilities of the Founders, this was a good plan, and it was actually going to really damage them, if not wipe them out.
Maybe, but then you've got, 10 Cardassian ships flying through the Gamma Quadrant with no cloaks, mind you?
No, I mean, even with the Romulans. I mean, the plan in general seemed to be a solid
the plan. With the Romulans.
Yeah, it seemed to be a solid plan, but it was undermined by the Changeling. Except for one thing, which is that Lovak was the one giving the message about, well, the Jem'Hadar won't be here for 7 hours and we'll have killed everybody by then. So that also could have been a lie. So they could have really underestimated the planet's defense systems because of that.
Also, Lovak said, when we heard about the plan, we did everything to push it forward. So maybe the Changelings were more instrumental in making this plan happen than...
That's a good point. And the faster they went, the fewer ships they would have, and the more sort of screwball captains they would have.
Oh, yeah.
Although we never saw any of the other captains. I just pictured that they were all like Tain.
Right.
Little old guys with their grandpa sweaters on.
Well, they made the reference earlier that they were all combat veterans.
Right.
So they could be literally a collection of just all these old guys who fought 50 years before.
Like the Klingons in Blood Oath.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Lovok tells Odo to come with him and become part of the Great Link, but Odo thanks him but says his answer is still no, and then Lovok beams away in the middle of all the fighting.
Oh, that was great.
Yeah.
In the middle of all that, he says to Odo, it's not too late. You can still become one with the Great Link if you wish. And Odo still turns it down after everything.
He gave a little look to Garak, but he still said no.
Yeah.
Garak tells Odo how to get to the runabout, saying he's going to go and get Tain. He says he still owes him a personal debt, and he has to try and repay it. He asks Odo to wait as long as he can for them, and he heads to the bridge. On the bridge, everything is destroyed, and everyone is dead, it seems like, except for Tain, who they again keep showing in dramatic close-up, and he's just rambling about how there must have been an informant. Garak tells him about Lovok and tries to get him to come with, but Tain is having a conversation with himself, saying he underestimated the Founders, and there was a time nothing got past him, which is maybe why retirement was a good idea, dude. Tain doesn't want to go back to his quiet retirement. He realizes he let his pride override his instincts. In the old days, he would have kept Lovok at arm's length. Garak keeps trying to get him to come with, but he doesn't move. And then Odo sneaks up behind Garak and knocks him out, throwing him over his shoulder and carrying him out. As Odo leaves, Tain keeps babbling to himself. These Founders, Elam, they're very good. Next time, we should be more careful. And the camera is like right in his face. Again, I think trying to emphasize his madness a little bit.
Again, I think this shows he's not the man he was.
Yeah, right.
Tain doesn't have his fingers in every pie. He doesn't know everything that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think he's a little bit nutty, the way he's having that conversation with himself.
I think that's the worst part of it. He doesn't realize it. He still thinks he's the head of the Obsidian Order, that he controls everything, that the ground shakes when he walks.
So is he Caesar? I was trying to figure out who is who.
I think Tain is supposed to be Caesar, actually.
Because they're trying to stop him from gaining power. That would make him Caesar.
I suppose in that respect, yes.
Right.
I guess that's the point. Caesar didn't see the threats around him until it was too late.
And Lovok, I guess, would have been Brutus, kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not an exact...
Right.
It's not an exact match, but yeah, kind of.
That's the parallel, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, but also remember, in the play, we're dealing with a not really past his prime, but definitely not Gallic wars, wars against the Gauls. That's Caesar, rather than, older, kind of been sitting around, not doing much for a while, Caesar.
Yeah, it's their own version of the story, just using parallels.
Yeah.
Well, on the runabout, Garak has quite a bruise on his face from Odo punching him. They're being pursued by a Jem'Hadar ship, and their shields are completely gone. Garak says, Odo, I hope you can accept my sincere apologies for all of this. Which he waited, by the way, till the shields were totally gone to say it. Odo says it's a little late. He doesn't agree with what Garak did, but he can understand Garak's desire to return home. Thank you, Garak says.
Wow.
I don't know. I realize this all happened under duress, but it still seemed awfully easy.
Oh, I loved this. This was the perfect response to that piece from earlier where Garak tried to imply that Odo couldn't understand how humanoids felt because he didn't have feelings.
Right. That he didn't care about anything.
This totally showed how not only did Odo have feelings, but he could empathize precisely with Garak's situation. It was a perfect counterpoint to that discussion that they had earlier.
Well, and even just asking for his forgiveness shows that he believes he has feelings.
Right.
Which maybe he wouldn't have done before all of this.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he does that at what ostensibly is the end, it shows also a respect for Odo. He really does care what Odo thinks.
Well, they put each of them into sort of the same situation where we've known for a long time that Garak longs to go home.
Yeah.
And now he knows that Odo longs to go home, except he's got a different kind of conflict, right? That's stopping him. It's an internal conflict.
Yeah.
So they're trying to give them some kind of a link. Well, things are looking very bleak. Just as the Defiant flies into the picture and starts blowing up Jem'Hadar cockroach ships.
Before you get too deep into this, I just want to point out, yes, I understand that this would rob us of a very great space battle scene. But Lovok, do you maybe want to tell some Jem'Hadar that there's a founder on that runabout?
I thought the same thing. Like, maybe don't shoot that runabout. And you know what? Maybe that's why they don't destroy it, because their shields are actually down for a while.
Okay.
Well, yeah, maybe the idea was to actually disable the shuttle, because remember, the founders really don't seem to understand why Odo doesn't want to join them.
Nope. And they keep trying.
Yeah.
Come join our club.
So perhaps it's disable that shuttle, take out the shields, get it so that they're totally defenseless. And maybe Odo will go, okay, I've changed my mind.
Yeah, they're going to keep trying.
You're right.
Well, the Defiant locates the runabout, and they beam Garak and Odo onto the Defiant, and we lose yet another runabout. Should have kept track. Sisko does some fancy flying to blow up some other Jem'Hadar ships, and the Defiant makes a run for it while the Jem'Hadar keep shooting at the other ships in the fleet.
Oh, yeah. This is a great space battle. I love it. Also, if you notice, it's a straight power play.
It is a straight power play.
They charge straight at the Jem'Hadar ships and just take 2 of them out immediately and then disable the third one. That was great.
Well, we end the scene when Kira gets up from her station and goes over to Odo just to let him know that it's good to see him.
Nice touch.
We go back to the station, and Sisko is talking to Admiral, what's-his-name, saying that there's no indication any of the other ships survived the attack. I sincerely doubt that's the last we'll see of Tain, because otherwise I feel like they would have shown his demise. But the Admiral says he's decided not to file charges against anyone on the Defiant. He says if Sisko pulls another stunt like that, he'll court-martial him or promote him. And then he smiles and hangs up. Then we go to Garak's clothiers, and he's picking up the pieces of his destroyed shop when he sees a reflection of Odo in a broken mirror. We only see Odo's silhouette in this scene and Garak's profile. It's kind of a peculiar directing choice.
Oh, it looks great.
But Odo read the report that Garak wrote. I'm not sure why Garak would write a report. He's not in the Federation or in Starfleet. But anyway, Odo came to thank him for keeping his secret. Garak thinks that entire conversation is best forgotten. Odo agrees, and he thinks he should rebuild the tailor shop. Garak says, you know what's sad? I'm a very good tailor. Like, I really don't want to do this because I hate it, but I guess I'm okay at it. And then Odo says, they should have breakfast together sometime. And Garak is like, I thought you didn't eat. I don't, Odo says. And he turns and leaves. Or at least his silhouette leaves. I wondered if the actor wasn't actually available to film this scene or something. I couldn't figure out what the point of that was.
Oh.
But anyway, the end.
Excellent.
So, who has overanalysis to start with?
Okay, first off, we'd seen the Defiant face off against Jem'Hadar ships before and not survive very well.
Yes.
This time, just blowing through them like there was nothing there. They did a fantastic job. My theory is it's because Miles has done a considerable amount of tinkering with the Defiant, so it's significantly more powerful than it was before.
I think that's a fair guess. And also, hopefully, they studied some of the reasons why they failed and have changed their tactics a bit.
Exactly.
But you would also think the Jem'Hadar would also evolve. But anyway.
And the other rationale for that is when Sisko says it'll be 2.5 hours before the Defiant is ready to leave, because Miles is doing all these tweaks and all these little things he's done to the ship.
Ah, upgrades.
Precisely. Next thing, throughout this whole episode, much more than in the first one, I get this sense that Garak is shocked by the feelings that he's having. It's like he doesn't understand what he's feeling in these situations. It's not the fun that it was before. It's not feeling right. And this is causing him an enormous amount of confusion. I don't think he even understands why he's feeling the way that he does.
Right, because he's never lived in an empathetic world before.
Exactly. He basically grew up in an abusive environment, and once exposed to an environment that was not abusive, where people were actually collaborative, gave these feelings the ability to flourish.
And I think the acting here was great because he always seemed to be on the edge of confusion. Almost like, what are these strange emotions I'm having?
I read somewhere that the actor who plays Garak, Andrew Robinson, he said that in that scene when he knelt down to Odo and he told him to just say anything, even if it was a lie, that this was the first real moment of honesty from Garak, that was sort of the beginning of something. Yeah. And so I think that aligns with what you're saying, that in that moment, something changed.
Yeah. Next thing. Psychological damage to Odo. Having read about the effects of torture on humanoids, I'm now worried about Odo and the long-term effects.
Well, it's still an episodic show, and he'll probably be fine next week. We don't talk about Burial. That's my example.
And what we know about Odo's upbringing is he wasn't actually brought up in the most loving and stable of environments, so...
No.
He's already able to survive this kind of thing.
It seemed like, though, this was really the first time that Odo felt pain. So it could have been quite traumatic for him.
I really like in that scene where, at the beginning, Odo has a lot of bravado, like, oh yeah, you're going to torture me. But then when he realizes there might be something that causes him pain, he's like, okay.
Oh, crap. Yeah. I don't know how you recover from that in terms of the two of them.
That was one of my questions as well, and we could get into it here. Like, do we buy that they would just be okay and having breakfast at the end of this episode? I don't think so.
I don't. And that's my first note is like, what did that ending mean? Does he just want to keep more of an eye on Garak? They found that thing in common, but I don't think it's enough to just say, okay, all is forgiven and now we're
right.
buds?
I don't think it's enough. I think the DS9 writers are trying to say, oh, these are kindred spirits and they found each other and isn't that wonderful? But realistically, I don't think people would be able to shrug off something like torture and just be...
I would think not. I'd be very worried about that prototype device.
Oh, that's my first note. The introduction of the quantum stasis field, a very powerful device which comes in handy many, many times throughout the run of this series.
Not the last time we see that.
Yeah, you need to build something that counteracts it.
The founders seem smart enough to.
Yeah, exactly.
And my final point here.
Yeah.
Was there any surprise that Odo still wants to return to the Great Link? This is really for you, Kim.
No, I don't think it's really a surprise that he longs for that because he'd spent his entire existence trying to find it and trying to find home. He was just a little bit disgusted by his people when he found them. And that extreme sense of justice that he has, or at least his own brand of it, really prevents him from just getting over it and jumping back in. I think that would really compromise his principles. But it's not a surprise to me that he would still want to be able to go into it and to be a part of it because he's still longing for that family.
Yeah. Over to you, Attiba.
I have a few things. So in my research, I found out that initially this was not supposed to be a 2-part episode.
Wow.
The first episode was actually supposed to end, I don't know if you can remember, all the way back to last week, but near the end of that episode, as Garak is boarding the runabout, he tells Bashir about a hidden panel in his quarters and a rod that he can eat.
Yeah.
In the episode, it plays as just kind of a funny, jokey thing. But in the original writing of that episode, that was supposed to be the thing. Bashir was supposed to find that rod, and Garak was supposed to be able to say, hey, Tain, I've got this rod. And Tain's supposed to be like, what's on it? And Garak's like, oh, yeah, don't you want to know? And then the rod, Bashir finding the rod becomes the way they escape. But the writer said, this does not really feel good. This is not great.
Yeah.
And they wrote kind of in a hurry. It's a different writing team than wrote Improbable Cause. Wrote the Dies Cast. That's why it's 2 different production numbers and 2 different titles. And I really think it was the right decision because the 2 of them together, you just get so much out of the Odo and Garak relationship, even though I think we agreed it maybe should not have gone back to status quo as easily as it did. I think there was a whole lot of development of both of those characters that we were able to take advantage of because they decided to write this second episode. The Mekong, which blows up in this episode or gets destroyed in this episode, is replaced by the runabout Rubicon, the river Rubicon famously crossed by Julius Caesar when he invaded Italy.
Wow.
Nice. Oh, that's a pretty good touch.
You, Kim, made a point about Tain wearing grandpa sweaters, and I think, isn't that the perfect outfit for a spy to wear? Just like to come at you in this guise of this doddering, kind of loving old grandfatherly type.
That's a great point.
Well, it would send all the wrong signals.
Which is maybe the point. Like you would let your guard down too much because he seemed less dangerous. So that is an interesting point. All those super close-ups on his face, Tain's face, what do you think that meant? You know, why was that the directing choice, I guess? The
directing choice there, I think, is just to, put the focus squarely on Tain, so that, we're meant to focus on what he's thinking about. I'm not 100% sure. There's a lot of directing choices in this episode that don't make a ton of sense to me. That might just be because of the rush production.
I was wondering whether it was to focus on Tain in control. He is a man fully in control of the situation. Certainly in his mind.
In his mind, that's the part that I agree with. I kind of thought that's why they kept zooming in on him, was to give you the impression that there was so much going on in his head that we weren't even really seeing.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of strange. And then also the directing choice of the very last scene where you don't actually see Odo. You hear his voice and you see that silhouette, which could be Odo, could be anybody. I thought that was very strange too. And I wasn't really sure why they did that. Sometimes you can at least pick up on what the reasons are for weird directing choices like that. But that one didn't make any sense to me.
I mean, I feel like it might be something like Garak would normally be the guy in the shadows and Odo would be the guy in the light. Maybe like it's showing how their relationship is changing, but I don't know. That's me stretching.
Oh, that's a pretty good one, though. The spy master role is reversed. Yeah.
Well, and at that point, maybe we are supposed to be suspicious of what Odo is saying. You know, that, now we're going to be buds and go to breakfast together. But maybe you're supposed to be a little bit suspicious of that. And Garak kind of seems to take it at face value. But that's a good thought.
It also may point to, up to this point, the principal threat in the series were the Cardassians. But now in this episode, it shifts and makes the principal threat the Founders.
Oh, yeah. The Founders are definitely the threat. That's okay. That's good. My points in overanalysis, I think we've covered all of them. So I'm just going to move to women in the future, which again, there isn't much. There were a few women on the Romulan bridge and they were just doing their jobs, which is great. And then also Dax and Kira just really didn't have much to do. So there's not much to say on this topic. So I am just going to jump to rating. I would be shocked if we didn't hear a lot of thumbs up here. But James, what is your rating?
Absolute thumbs up. Avery is great. We have space battles. So much good stuff in this episode.
Attiba.
It's a thumbs up for me. It's not as great as I remember, but the Odo and Garak stuff more than make up for the clunky bits.
Yeah, thumbs up for me too. I quite enjoyed it. You said last week that I was going to like it, and then you also said something about, but you liked the first one more than the second one, so I didn't quite know what to expect. And I didn't expect this. I didn't expect what I got, that's for sure.
Really?
No. Now that 2 times now, the Founders have appeared in places where I didn't expect them, looking like the perfect replica of whoever they're replacing. So now I'm just going to assume everybody is a Founder. I can see from here, I'm going to be like, oh, that's not that person. That's a changeling. Because now they've done it twice. And it's like, fool me twice, shame on me, right? Now I'm not going to be fooled. Now I'm going to think everybody's a Founder.
Changelings do turn up where you least expect.
Yes.
Well, that was a lot of thumbs up. This was a very entertaining 2-parter. I assume we are at the beginning of many things that are going to tie into this, especially since Lovak made that statement about how he didn't think there was going to be much of a threat anymore from the Klingons and the Federation. So I'll be very curious to see what that is. I don't know how much more Garak we see from here, but holy cow, he's great. Although I was not happy with him torturing Odo, but that character he's so watchable and he's just so interesting. I really like him.
I'm trying not to give you any spoilers. This is probably the turning point in the entire series.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is the top of the roller coaster.
I don't know how I feel about that yet. I guess let's see how it goes. I might miss some of the goofy stuff that also goes on, some of the normal Star Trek stuff, but I guess we have to see.
No, it remains very episodic.
Don't worry, there'll be way more Quark adventures. You don't have to...
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think there's a Ferengi one coming up either next week or the week after. So yeah, I'll still have to suffer the fate of the Ferengi. Okay, well, I think that wraps up Season 3, Episode 21. So, Attiba, thank you for joining us. I assume you've got another 2 or 3-parter that you're going to join us for next season.
I'm really tempted to come in for Way of the Warrior, but there is so much going on in that 2-parter that it might be a bit much, but I will look over Season 4 and let you know which episodes really I have strong opinions about.
All right, that sounds good. And obviously people can go to your website, attibaroyster.com, to look at your artwork. And then you also mentioned last week that you have a podcast. Remind us of the name.
Yes, my brother and I, we do a podcast where we talk about a number of pop culture topics, and it is called Teebs and Kid Phoenix Versus. You can find it at Teebs and Kid Versus on Twitter, and the podcast is on all the normal places, Stitcher, Apple, Spotify, all those places.
Excellent. Okay, so that wraps up episode 21. Come back next week for episode 22. In the meantime, if you want to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at rebingeit@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at rebingeit. Also, check us out on talkthroughmedia.com. You can leave feedback there for individual episodes, and you can also listen to the other podcasts on our network.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.
And that's it from me.